online, on mobile, and soon on DAB. This is Starr Radio UK, the leading Afro-Caribbean radio station in London.
The IWFT team presents Footprints on Starr Radio UK with your host, Oscar Bimpong, every Thursday at 7 p.m. Starr Radio UK, your finest Afro-Caribbean station in London.
Welcome to the Footprints Radio Talk Show, and this is your regular host, Oscar Bimpong, always in the driving seat, taking you to your destination of success. It's another Thursday, and we are here to do what we love doing. The question is, what do we love doing? What we love doing is to inspire you. What we love doing is to share knowledge. What we love doing is to let you understand that you are born for greatness. What we love doing is to help you with your vision, to help you with your business, or to help you with anything that you want to achieve in life. The point is that we are not here to tell you that everything is going to be rosy, everything is going to work well, but we are here to tell you that if you really work hard, have a strategy, you get knowledge in your industry, you are bound to succeed. Success is for those that go for it. Success is for those that start. Success is for those that persist. Success is for those that stand out in the marketplace. And today is not an exception. Why? Because we are here to discuss a pertinent topic that is really killing a lot of businesses, killing a lot of visions, and we are here to really discuss it. Before I go on, I would like to talk to you about one of the sponsors of this program. This program is sponsored by Train to Inspire Consultancy. Train to Inspire Consultancy says inspiring our generation through training and development. And that is what it's all about. It's for all your training needs. It's for all your consulting for your business startup. It is for your consulting needs in terms of your business development. And it is about helping you to strategically position yourself in the marketplace. We are also into mindset coaching. We are also into motivational speaking as well. If you have an organization that are really down, they need some level of inspiration to kickstart your group or association, please just let us know. Train to Inspire Consultancy is inspiring our generation through training and development. You can inbox me at info@oscarbimpong.com, or you can send me a message on social media. All my social media handles are Oscar Bimpong. Now, straight to business, because I'm in love with this topic. And what are we going to discuss? We are going to talk about corporate governance. And what is corporate governance? I don't have much knowledge about it, but I understand the dynamics of how it works. But for deeper understanding, I have brought somebody into the studio to really help us to discuss this pertinent topic. And who am I talking about? This person is a chartered accountant by profession. He's a chartered accountant by profession. He is a corporate trainer, and he is an international development consultant. He is Marek Kofigan. Marek, please welcome to the Footprints, and you are live on Starr Radio UK.
Oscar, thank you for having me. Good evening to yourself and to all your listeners. I hope you can read me loud and clear, though.
Very loud and clear. Very loud and clear. I think this is one of my clearest one. I don't know where you are getting your internet from. Or you got a special package.
No, I'm. Should I advertise who my I'm using what are they called? I'm using a network here in Ghana called BusyNet.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's really clear. And I think next time I will tell my guests that I interview from Ghana to really use that, because this is very clear. And how is Ghana treating you?
We're okay. I think we're good. I think we're good. It's been good so far. I'm happy to be back. Definitely very happy to be back.
I think you have done very well, because I always tell people that for you to say Ghana is hard, you have to stay there for 6 months. If you haven't stayed in Ghana for 6 months from abroad, don't say Ghana is hard. You go 2 weeks and you spend £100 a day, and you think that's the way life should be. No. So you've done very, very well for staying there all this while and still pushing and doing stuff that is making Ghana great. And I've been following you. They say that the person that is really doing the job doesn't know how he's impacting lives. But I think you are doing an amazing job. And all I can say is that keep it up.
I am honored. Thank you very much.
Now,
we do the little we can.
Yes, and when a lot of I've got some ladies coming to me saying, "Who is this guy? Who is this guy?" Because your picture looks like, I don't know. It looks like all your handsomeness really came through that picture. So I have to ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is Marie Kofi Gan? That brand name.
Well, I mean, you've already introduced me. I'm an accountant, a Ghanaian to start with. I'm an accountant, and I've practiced in international development at least the last 10 years. I used to be in the UK, as you know already, but I'm back in Ghana now, trying to do my bit for our great and wonderful nation. So that's just a little bit about me. Unless there's something else I've missed out.
No, that's really good. That's really good to start with. Now let's go straight to business, because a lot of people are waiting for this topic, and I've got a lot of feedbacks in terms of people saying that they are going to follow it. Now, what is corporate governance to an ordinary person on the street to understand?
Right. To an ordinary person. Okay, let me explain it this way. So if you take a plane, any plane, KLM, any budget plane, for example, that you fly on or that you might have flown on. Corporate governance includes 3 parts. The rules, the structures, and what we call the corporate practices. So basically, this is how it works. If you take a plane, for example, any plane for that matter, it doesn't matter the size of the plane. There are 3 things that help a plane, for example, move from, say, Kotoka International Airport to Heathrow, or from Heathrow to somewhere else. Now, those 3 things are what I've classified as the structures, the rules, and then the practices. So one of the things that helps the plane move from point A to B is its body, how it is structured, how it is formed. You know, the fuselage and everything, the whole part of his body, you know, the cockpit, the physical things you can see. So that's the structure. That's the structure. That's where we all sit in and then fly out. The other thing that helps the plane move from one point to another are what we call the practices. So those are the things, for example, that have become accepted practice to do when you're on board the plane. For example, when you get on board a plane, you are told to watch the stewards on the plane demonstrate how the seat belts are used and emergency landing procedures. Those are all practices. Then, of course, you have the rules. The rules are the ones you cannot put aside. You have to follow those rules. So, for example, the rules say if you're about to take off, you need to call into the tower to get permission to fly out. And then when you're about to land, you need to call into the host tower to ask permission to land. There are rules around how much fuel you can top up before you fly out. There are rules around speed of the takeoff. So those are all rules. Now, if you notice, all these 3 sets of elements, the rules, the structures, and the practices, they all help move the plane from point A to point B safely. The same thing applies to corporate governance. So corporate governance is basically, like I've explained, the rules, the structures, and the practices that help move an organization in a certain direction. They also help control the organization. So if we if we are starting off as a baby company, we want to become the fastest growing company or the biggest growing company or the most profitable company, whatever our objective is as a company. We need all these structures, we need all these rules, we need all these practices to be able to move the company from a position of being born the first day to a position where we become the biggest company or the smartest company or the most loved company by customers. So basically, corporate governance is simply a set of rules, structures, and practices that help to direct a company and to control its operations.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. You see, the teacher you knew is still there, you know. I wonder if I was your student, I would have done very well, you know, because look at the way you break this down to the level of the ordinary person. But let me take it from the grassroots in terms of somebody having a vision, and
Sure.
the person, the aim is to get into the corporate level. Now,
Right.
the question is, how do they build a structure? I think there are different structures for maybe sole proprietorship and all that. But how do they get into the corporate level, and what structure should they really think about in terms of, because some people start alone, but before, in about 5-10 years, they have a corporate entity. How do they build that structure?
Right. So you're right when you say there are different structures. So you have the sole proprietorship. You normally would have things like also partnerships.
Yes.
You would have the limited
Limited
company or
liability.
limited by guarantee. It depends on what you're doing. In the UK, you are blessed or you are lucky if you go on the website of the Charities Commission, for example. It gives you breakdowns of all the structures that there are. If you go on the other websites for the corporate sectors, you also have breakdowns of the various structures you have. And it also goes ahead and tells you in what circumstances it makes sense to use which structures. Now, a lot of people start off thinking they necessarily need to set up a company directly. I think a lot goes into that thinking process. You don't always need to go off by starting a company unless you can deal with some of the things that go along with maintaining a company. For example, you need to be sending in returns at the end of every year, whether you've traded or done any business or not. You need to be having your accounts, you know, audited or otherwise. So there are a lot of things that go into determining which structure you want to start with. Having said that, none of the structures, you know, exempt you from carrying out corporate governance, even if it is a very sole proprietorship, very small sole proprietorship. It's still a structure. There are still rules you have to abide by in order to make it work at that level. There are still practices you have to adopt to make it work at that level. So I don't think the rules, the structures, or the practices differ depending on the structure you're using. They only get either bigger or smaller depending on what level you are at. So if it is corporate governance we're talking about, really, it applies at all levels. Some people think the rules are a lot more relaxed when you are at a very low level, say maybe a sole proprietorship level. Actually, the rules are a bit even stronger there because you don't have to deal with only the corporate structure, rules, or practices. You actually have to deal with your own discipline. And that is often the hardest part when it comes to corporate governance at a very smaller level. So to answer your question, I think it's really a matter of seeing what you are capable of and the size of the business you're about to start. There are some businesses where, you know, you're starting off as a plumber, you know, in the UK, for example, or anywhere else, and you have just 2 clients. I wouldn't say it makes sense to start off by opening a limited company, for example. I would say start off as a sole proprietor, and then as your company grows or the size increases, it will make more sense to be able to expand to the corporate nature that we're talking about.
I think, Marik, I think probably you're a bit closer to your device. Just relax a little bit. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I think I'm turning my phone off as well.
Oh, okay. Because I think there was a bit of in terms of breaks.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we are good now. Yeah, I think that really makes sense in terms of if we want to start from the sole proprietorship. It's a structure, but so you have to really organize yourself and go with whatever laws that is binding that that level of that you need in terms of which one you want to use, whether it's limited liability partnership or the sole proprietorship. Now, in terms of the corporate entity, can you take us through the hierarchy or the structure of a corporate entity? Because without the structure of the corporate entity, there's no governance, isn't it?
Well, pretty much, yeah. So normally, I mean, the traditional hierarchy you see is that there is always a board at the very top. So, and we'll talk about that at some point. So there's normally a board, and then underneath the board is the management team. And then the management team, after the management team, you normally have the operational workers. So largely they are mostly three levels. I mean, you can have companies that have different combinations of structures, but this is usually the main structure. So the board, for a corporate entity, the board is usually the highest level of decision making. And they involve themselves in different things. So they are largely responsible for the strategy of the organization, of the company. They determine which direction we want this company to go. So when it comes to strategy, they are the first on the very top, that they decide the direction of the company should be, the general direction the company should be going. And then the board also gets involved in things like the appointment of the management team, their remuneration, for example, and other things around management. So basically, the board is responsible for more or less. It's almost as though the board is the steer of the vehicle. They determine, look, we're heading in this direction or we're heading in that direction. And then based on the direction they want to head and the strategy they have outlined for that to happen, the management team takes out that strategy and operationalize that strategy. So it's almost as though the management sits between the board, which is the head, the thinking element there, and then the operational system. So if you take a human body, for example, you've got a brain, which we'll call the board, and then you've got the arms and your limbs and all that. Now, between the head and the arms, you've got nerves. The nerves are the ones that take information from the brain and then force the arm to either rise up or the feet to actually walk, if that is what the head wants them to do. So that generally is the structure of the hierarchy within a corporate entity. Now, let's not forget that at the board level, I don't know if you wanted me to break it down, but at the board level, you can either have members on there that are from the organization, or you can have members on there that are from outside the organization. So if you're from outside, you normally be called a non-executive director. If you're from within, you normally be called an executive board person.
Wow, that's really interesting, and that's I like the way you simplify complex issues, because these things sometimes, even when you read books, they cannot even break it down the way you are breaking it down. That is why I always tell people that this show is like reading a whole book in 2 hours, because the way we break things down for you, it makes those things very simple. Now, in terms of policies and procedure that governs a corporate institution, where does it come from? Does it come from the company itself, or it comes from the government, or the institution that also governs the corporate institution? I hope you get what I'm saying.
I do get what you're saying. I mean, that's a tricky one. It's a tricky one because when we say policies, for example, the policies have to be owned by the organization. They have to be owned. That is not to say that the organization outlines all its policies. So most of the policies come from the organization themselves, because they know the direction they're heading into, and so they formulate policies to help them get into those positions. However, most companies are also regulated within particular industries. And those industries may have their own industrial policies or industry-related policies that organizations that work within that industry have to adopt as their own. I'll give you an example. If you work in the NGO sector, one of the and you're working in international development, for example, one of the things that you need at some point to adopt is the regulations on anti-bribery and corruption, for example, because that applies to you whether you work in the UK or outside of the UK. So policies, whatever the case may be, they have to be owned by the organization, whether it's created within the organization or it relates to the industry in which the organization works. The practicality of it is this. The very top level board directorship takes responsibility for policies and procedures. Practically, however, because the board is not involved in the regular day-to-day activities, it is management. So things like the operational manager, the managing director, the marketing manager, those are the guys who come together, and based on what they go through on a day-to-day basis, they formulate those policies, and then they take them over to the board for the board to sign off on them.
Yes.
So practically speaking, the policies are written by the managers and the managerial team, and it's understandable why they should be the ones writing those, because they directly affect the day-to-day running of the organization. These are then taken up to the board, and the board is made to look through them and say, you know what, we think for the direction we have set and the strategies we expect the managers to carry out, these policies and procedures would be useful for them to make that happen.
I think this is very clear, and I really understand the angle you are coming from. But I want to really get this fact right. Now, you were talking about the company having its own policies and procedures, but probably they might be working in an industry, and that industry too can have its own procedures and policies. Now, that industry, for example, the banking sector, right? For example, in Ghana now, there is this banking crisis, right? And now, this banking crisis are within the domain of the Bank of Ghana, right? So now, if there is something going wrong, is it the Bank of Ghana that is supposed to step in, or is the banks that is supposed to regulate itself as soon as possible to rectify issues? Who has the command here, and who takes responsibility?
That's a very loaded question.
Very loaded, but let's try and simplify it because we've got only 2 hours.
No, so I mean, directors have responsibilities. Let's not forget that. You mentioned Ghana, for example. So there are various acts. The main ones are the Companies Code 1963 Act, I think 179, that got amended by Act 2012, and then there are various other subsections of that. So there's the Act 835, 673, and I think 738. So there are all those acts there that sort of make it clear, for example, how organizations are supposed to operate in terms of basic things like financial record keeping and other things around corporate governance, for example. Now, directors have responsibilities for whether or not their organizations abide, first of all, by their own policies, and whether those organizations also abide by the policies or regulations of the industries that they are required to operate in. Those are first and foremost the responsibilities of the directors and of course their management teams. Now, on the issue of whether it is Bank of Ghana's responsibility or otherwise. Now, Bank of Ghana, like you rightly said, does have regulations that those operating within its respective sectors, whether it's financial instruments or banking, have to abide by. Now, in my view, it is only when the company has failed to abide by its own policies and the policies or regulations structured by the industry it works in, and only if those infringements start affecting either the entire industry or the shareholders that or customers that those organizations are meant to serve. That's when the teams like Bank of Ghana move in to sort of arrest the situation. In the case of what is happening now, you would realize, I mean, there's a lot of things that have come up. The primary responsibility of Bank of Ghana should have been to step in and arrest a deterioration in the way these organizations were handling their affairs. And it wasn't only about corporate governance, I might say, but it was to step in and arrest those affairs. Now, what has, however, happened, and we have found that out now, it's obvious now, and we've seen all of that now, is the fact that, and I don't mean necessarily the current, administration of the Bank of Ghana, but it has become obvious that at the time these things had happened, the administration of the Bank of Ghana at the time were made aware of the infractions of the rules within the banking sector, but no actions were taken. So on that basis, you could almost argue that it was no more just the fault of the directors who were running the organizations. It has now become the fault of both the directors who first instance failed and the Bank of Ghana who should have stepped in to address the situation when they had the chance to at the time they did. I think what is happening now is just more or less cleaning the mess that has been created, both by directors of those banks and by whoever the team at the Bank of Ghana was at the time these infractions were first noticed.
You see, you made mention of the board of directors. They have to take charge of making sure that the policies and procedures are followed, right? But you made mention of the managers as well. But what is happening is that earlier on you said that the board of directors, they are not into the day-to-day running of the organization. Meaning that does that one create a lapse in terms of these policies and procedures being adhered to?
Not at all. Not at all. I'll tell you why not. So I remember when we were talking about corporate governance, when we were defining corporate governance the first time, I said it includes structures and it also includes rules and practices, for example. Now, one of the very basic practices in corporate governance is that there is always some form of relationship, meetings and connections and regular updates between the board and the management team, so that the board may not be running the organization on a day-to-day basis, but they are always aware of what is happening at the strategic level. If there are issues that are arising that need to be raised to that strategic level, they will be aware. And it is their duty to keep an eye on issues that are pending, issues that have already risen but have been dealt with. They need to keep an eye on those to see that they don't resurge. And on issues that they are keeping an eye on, they have to also be sure that, you know what, things have been put in place to make sure that they don't deteriorate further. So one of the practices at the corporate governance level is that there is always some connection, a regular connection between the board and the management team. And so there is no point where the board would be able to say they didn't know that X, Y, Z was happening, because within every corporate structure, there are usually rules that when something within the organization that is happening on a day-to-day basis goes above a certain level of importance, it needs to reach the board. And so those practices are there. There is also the practice of, say, for example, annual reporting, not just financial reporting, but annual reporting as a whole. So on an annual basis, and this is beside the usually quarterly meetings that happen between the board and the management team. But even on an annual basis, you have auditors coming in, you have financial statements being audited and things like that. Now, what a lot of people don't realize about financial statements is this. A financial statement is yes, it's about numbers, but it's also a numbers, it's a picture just in numbers form. It's a picture of the efficiency or the abilities of the managers and the directors themselves. So, we have financial statements that go out every year. Within those financial statements, there are directors' report. And in that director's report, the board is involved in carving that out. And so there is also, this annual process and then the quarterly processes that all ensure that the board is always aware of things happening within the organization.
This shows that the board, because it looks like most of the times when you hear the word board of directors, it looks like they are not even part of the organization, and it looks like they just come for a cup of tea and just have some meetings and go away. But it looks like you are bringing them more into the picture in terms of their roles. So meaning that everything that comes up, you said the financial statement, for example, is a picture, and a picture does not lie, meaning that it gives you the clear understanding of the health status of the organization.
That's correct. Which is why when the auditor expresses an opinion, we accountants either call it, he's either given the company a clean bill of health or not. So to us, it is not just numbers. To us as accountants, we see how well the company has done, how well it has carried out its procedures, how well it has exercised its policies. They all show up in the numbers for us. So when we look at numbers, for example, as accountants, we don't just see numbers, we see how well everybody has functioned within the organization. Except that instead of writing it in words and all that, we capture it in numbers. And yet we do understand those numbers, and directors do understand some of those numbers. It is their duty to understand some of those numbers. That's why they are the level where they are. And yes, the buck starts and stops with directors.
So with this, why is it that some organization cannot arrest situations that can lead to collapse?
I wish I could answer that question, but a number of factors can lead to issues happening and they not being arrested in time, and then they deteriorate further. I mean, one of them is largely psychological. For example, the psychology for when you get into those management positions, the psychology that sort of you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis is that you know very well if something goes bad and it is accepted as the fact that it went bad and it went bad on your watch, it sort of dents your ability as a management person. So the psychology you have to deal with every day is that sometimes you may see things are going bad, but you still feel you can push it to the very end in the hope that you can turn it around, when sometimes really all you need to do is to say and say to yourself, you know what, I don't think I'm handling this well. I need to bring in somebody to come and help. And so quite a number of these things, failures that happen are psychological. But then again, in some of the cases we have seen in the Ghana issue you raised, some of them is pure thievery.
Yes, that is the word many people don't want to hear.
We've tried to, we can polish it as much as we can, but the truth is that, this is why I say it's thievery. Bank of Ghana knows I think Bank of Ghana understands the psychology behind dealing with money and the temptation of wanting to use those monies, other people's monies.
Yes.
And therefore, it sets rules around things like capital adequacy. It sets rules around how much money you can have in your own, banking circulation and all that. All of that is to not only protect the organization, the bank itself, but also protect the shareholders and, of course, protect the customers whose monies have been put in the banks. So if you infringe on all of those, not out of mistake, but with intent, then yes, we are right to say, thievery and stealing has come into the picture, because then it was done intentionally. There are banks who have failed because they took a chance and, in a normal course of doing business, and then the risk caught up with them. Those are different scenarios. They are different from actually taking money that was meant for relieving your customers and then using it for something totally different. For example, putting it in another bank to be set up. That's pure. That's malicious, that's intentional, and that is thievery. It's as simple as that. I don't care what anybody else calls it.
But ethically, is it right for you to use money that has been given to you to save a particular bank, and you use it to invest in others? Is it ethically right, or is it in the banking constitution? Is it right in the first place?
It cannot be ethically right. I mean, if Bank of Ghana says don't do it, it's because it is not ethical. I mean, when you look at the banking sector, for example, and in every other territory, the bank of the country, in our case, the Bank of Ghana, for example, is the highest level of ethical organization within the banking sector. And so when they say don't do something, it's because they have considered all the elements of it, the ethical elements of it. They've considered the financial element of it. They've considered the citizenry protectionally elements of it. So once they say don't do it, it is very fair to assume that it is not ethical. That is why you've been asked not to do it. So Bank of Ghana sets the ethics when it comes to the banking sector. If you infringe its rules, you are ethically committing murder.
So does it mean that this crisis in Ghana now is different from the economic downturn in 2008? That's the banking crisis that happened in the West. Because
it's quite different. It's quite different. I mean, the financial crisis that happened was more or less Um, so it wasn't that they weren't infringing per se on banking laws per se. What they were doing was that, so for example, they were giving loans to people whom some of them knew very well they couldn't pay.
Yes.
It is not against banking rules to give out loans. Yes, you are asked to assess whether or not the person can pay. So there is also an element of risk, blatant risk taking in there, purely for the purpose of making profit. So there is that element. So there's an ethical element in there. Although it is at the very tail end, if you see what I mean, in the sense that is at the customer end of it. What is happening in Ghana is happening at the governance end of it. So that is at the level where the thing is supposed to be the highest, because if it breaks down at that level, it sure will break down at the very far end. And that is what for me, that is the big difference. There's one that is happening at the consumer level, and this is happening at the governance level, so to speak.
When are you going back to the classroom?
I actually have a lecture coming up somewhere in the Caribbean.
Wow. Because I'm truly loving this, because this is a clear distinction. I think a lot of people didn't really understand. They didn't understand what was actually going on. For example, bringing in the banking crisis in the UK and the Americas at the customer end, and Ghana one at the governance end of it, meaning that they didn't even allow the resources to trickle down onto the shareholders and the customers, and they are supposed to be the beneficiaries, isn't it?
I think at the time when Bank of Ghana gave the monies for the liquidity support, basically what it was doing was protecting the customers. Because look, customers bringing money, there are no rules around banks using that money to generate more income and then keeping some for themselves and giving some back to customers. The golden rule, however, is that don't chop the one that the customers have brought in. But that is what was done. So what Bank of Ghana was seeking to do at the time when it gave the liquidity support was to say, you know what, the customers brought in X billion, you chop the X billion. But because we need to protect the customers because it wasn't their fault, for now, here is X billion of the customers' money. Give it back to them as and when they demand it. It must not be used for anything else because you've already squandered the ones they brought in. So this is purely for the customers. In a nutshell, that's all that Bank of Ghana was doing. And then these guys now go ahead and take the one that Bank of Ghana gave them for customers and decided to chop that one or to use that for purposes it was not intended for. I think is the right way to put it. That's me being diplomatic.
Yeah, but this really makes it very serious issue, and I think we are undermining this whole thing.
We are. I don't think a lot of people see it, but basically what has happened is that money has been chopped on two levels. The first level is the ones that the customers themselves brought. That was used, and they lost that. And then the second level was the one government brought in and say, you know what, here is money. We don't want the customers to suffer. Here is one. Here is something for you to use for them. And then that one too was blown. It can't get simpler than that in terms of explanation. That's really what has happened.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting. You see, they say, like, if you make the first mistake, fine, but to make the second mistake on the same thing, that one I think becomes suicidal, isn't it? Because
there are no mistakes.
Yes, yeah, because they knew what they were doing. And I don't know why they should take even the second money and invest it somewhere. So does it mean that even their policies and procedures weren't working? And this one comes to my next question of monitoring and internal control.
Right.
Is this the same as policies and procedures?
Well, you set policies and procedures, and then you have, so those policies and procedures may necessitate certain controls to be put in place. However, controls do not operate by themselves. Controls are operated by mostly the people who set them up. So there is something we call the control environment. And when we say the control environment, we are basically saying two things. We're saying, here are the controls, but here are also the control environment. The control environment are the managerial team, the directors who are supposed to be watching over those controls to make sure they are operational and they are always running. When you have management that overrides those internal controls, then you start having a problem. So I don't think the problem was ever the internal policies or the Bank of Ghana regulations. The problem was human beings who had intent, who decided to flout those policies and flout the regulations within the banking industry.
So meaning that they discarded it, and they
pretty much.
But there is nothing that really says in terms of, for example, that's from the side of Bank of Ghana saying that, look, if you don't abide by these rules and regulations, these policies and procedures we have put in place, this is what needs to be done to you. Don't you have something like that?
Oh, there are. I mean, like we're saying, I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, there are reports that we know are available now that were written and made available to Bank of Ghana regarding the fact that these companies were contravening their own policies and contravening regulations within the banking sector. And like I said at the time, those responsible at Bank of Ghana failed to move and take action on what those reports suggested were going wrong. So it's sort of, in my view, it sort of just empowered the management and the directors of the failed banks to just continue with what they were doing. And I mean, it's on record now that, you know, some of them actually provided wrong documentation and wrong evidences of capital in order to get licenses, for example. And who gives licenses? Bank of Ghana gives licenses. Exactly. Again, I must continue saying that some of these licenses were given in the prior regime, and that needs to be clear. So we don't apportion blames to the wrong people. But, you know, Bank of Ghana as a whole has a big role to play in all of this, largely because it has a banking supervision department which is responsible for exactly this, to go out there into every bank from time to time and check for themselves whether all the banks are doing what they are required to do. So that is one part of it. The other part of it is this, that some of the risks were supposed to have been caught up from the word go. For example, if you are coming to apply for a license, you are required to put down some capital. There certainly should be checks in Bank of Ghana that say that, you know what, yes, the capital that is supposed to be required from you before you are allowed to get a license, yes, you have it. Now, if we find out now that that is not happening, then it means, you know, even for Bank of Ghana, the risk is no more at the level of supervision. The risk is actually appearing at the level of ready, set, go.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I think I'm really enjoying this discussion. Trust me. And you know, when the discussion is good, time flies. So we're going to go for a quick commercial break. When we come back, we are going to continue our discussion. If you are watching us live on Facebook, please share this video, because somebody might be listening to this discussion, and probably because of this discussion, that person will not make any post that shows his or her negligence in terms of corporate governance, because there is more into what we know in terms of generally what corporate governance is all about. But Mari Kofi Gan, my man, is getting deeper into the dynamics of corporate governance. We're going for a quick commercial break. Don't change the dial. If we come back, we are going to continue our discussion.
The IWFT team presents Footprints on Starr Radio UK with your host, Oscar Bimpong, every Thursday at 7 p.m. Starr Radio UK, your finest Afro-Caribbean station in London.
I believe in the sun.
What's the hidden truth or mysteries behind the supernatural? Do angels really exist today? Is healings and miracles real? Can I hear the voice of God? Was there inspirations and challenges in ministry? Can my eyes be open to see beyond the natural? Can I operate in the gifts of the Holy Spirit? Can my dreams contain messages from God? My Journey is your one-stop destination to the supernatural on Starr Radio UK. Join your host, Captain Tete, this and every Saturday from 4 p.m. on My Journey, your one-stop destination to the supernatural.
Bed of roses, bed of roses, bed of roses. My name is Doreen Carter. I invite you to join me on Starr Radio UK this and every Saturday at 9:30 p.m. in discussing what goes on behind the curtains with my panel of experts. Remember, the time is 9:30 p.m. this and every Saturday. Bed of Roses is brought to you by the kind courtesy of Voices of Esther.
Are you planning to get onto the property ladder? Are you thinking of getting into the property business? Do you live in a council flat? Do you live in a house and flat or house? Then join us this and every Thursday on the Property Hour Show on Starr Radio UK, 9 p.m. this and every Thursday, where we speak to the experts in the industry, the professionals in the property industry, where they show us and talk about the secrets in the property industry. It's booming. You can't afford to miss it. And also, you will learn how to start or get your first property without your own money. Join us and spread the news.
Listen to Aunties Mary, Lottie and Regina on the Family Enrichment Programme on Starr Radio UK this and every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m.
Some people are wicked because don't make it your business going about revealing
people's secrets. Don't be a busybody.
And some people. Today's typical family is under pressure from various directions. Divorce is on the increase. More and more of the Afro-Caribbean youth are taking to crime, etc. The Family Enrichment Program brings together a team of qualified experts to discuss and shed light on how we can make our families better and stronger. It is said the family can do without the society, but the society can't. Listen to the Family Enrichment Program this and every Saturday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Starr Radio UK, your favourite Afro-Caribbean radio station in London.
Download our app in iTunes and the Google Play Store.
Do you feel left out in your education or career but still want to do something about it? Then don't fret. If you are a resident in the UK, British or EU citizen, then there is hope for you. You are in the age bracket of 21 to 55. The UK government is offering grants, scholarships and financial support for first degree to masters in various courses. The government will pay all your fees and you can educate yourself in a peace of mind. From £21,000 per year for first degree, etc. Get in touch with GEM Educational Consultancy and we will guide you in applying for this facility. We are situated at 51 Albany Road, Hornchurch. The postcode is RM12 4AE. Telephone 079 0479 3019 or email us pastorjoeka@yahoo.com. Get financial support and acquire a degree. You can't always be in control of what happens on the road, but you can control the tires you ride on. Thanks to Champon tires, in testing condition, you are guaranteed of traction and grip, be it new or partly worn tire. Champon tires are the largest import and exporters of tires in the UK. Locate us all over the UK. For Wakefield, contact us on 01924 262 043. Selby, Rotherham, Hull, and Birmingham, contact us on 01709 380-615, or you can visit us at www.champontires.co.uk. Champon Tires, safe when new, safe when partly worn. If you've had an accident in the last 3 years, that was not your fault. Get in touch with London Accident Claims Limited. It could be a motor accident or a workplace injury. You could be entitled to compensation. Just one call to our specialist team will take care of everything. For minicab drivers with PCOs, there is even better news. We provide you with a replacement vehicle. Call us on 0800 032 6798 or 0208 665 7667 to start your claims with London Accident Claims Limited. London Accident Claims Limited, a partner you can trust.
The IWFT team presents Footprints on Starr Radio UK with your host Oscar Bimpong every Thursday at 7 p.m. Starr Radio UK, your finest Afro-Caribbean station in London.
Welcome to the Footprints Radio Talk Show, and this is your regular host Oscar Bimpong, always in the driving seat, taking you to your destination of success. I love Thursdays, man. A great opportunity for me to exhibit what I love doing, a great opportunity for me to learn, a great opportunity for me to always have an insight in terms of building my vision. I don't know whether you've got a vision like me, but if you've got a vision in life, then this is your best program. It is time sometimes we leave the politics and the entertainment and the fashion and really learn about things that can shape our mind, things that will give us knowledge, and things that will direct us to achieving our goals in life. Many of us want to succeed in life, but many are not ready. Because if you are ready, one of the best shows that you can get married to is the Footprints Radio Talk Show. Why? Because we invest in you. We invest in bringing in technocrats, experts, people who are knowledgeable in their industry to come and give you information that will help you to make informed decisions in pursuit of your goals. And today is not an exception. I've got a gentleman. He is not new on this show. I've lost count of how many times he's been on this show. He was here with me. He was my neighbor in London. Then all of a sudden, I had a call and he said, "Look, my telephone number has changed. I'm no more with you. So if you want to get hold of me, get me with +233. No more +44." And since then, the man has been on fire in Ghana, doing his bit to shape Mother Ghana. And trust me, people think that some of the sacrifices we are making will not pay off. It will definitely pay off at the right time, because there is a seed time and there is harvesting time. But we are seeding and we are working towards the harvesting time. And who is this man that I'm really talking about? He is a chartered accountant by profession. He's a corporate trainer and he's an international development consultant. He is in the person of Marek Kofi Gan, helping us to discuss corporate governance. Marek, please welcome back to the Footprints, and you're live on Starr Radio UK.
Thank you.
Wow, I'm really enjoying this. But tell me a little bit about your international development consultancy, because you've worked with so many countries across the world, and it looks like people don't know this. People think probably you're a local champion. They don't know that side of you, isn't it? Because I know that side of you always keep it quiet, but I think people should know, you know?
I've been consulting for a number of international development organizations, but you're right. I like to keep that side of my life quiet.
I know. Yes. So those people that think you're a local champion, they don't have a clue. I think we have to have that CV that you send it to, you know, the presidents and the governments of other nations, and they will say that, wow, this guy, man. Yes. Now, you know, I've been really enjoying this first half, to be honest, and I'm loving the whole thing, you know. But you see, I think you have touched on transparency and accountability, right? But and the central bank also playing a role in terms of corporate governance. Now the board of directors have also got a role. Now when it happens that they fail, who is supposed to be punished? Because to be honest with you, right, when you look at the UK one, you were here in this country, people lost money. I mean money. This, we are not even talking about cities, right? But the government came in to really resuscitate some of the banks, and some people got some level of compensation. Here, who gets, you know, to be fired? Because I was even reading out almost about 1,700 people have lost their jobs in Ghana in terms of the consolidated bank. And who is suffering? Because the people at the lower ranks don't make decisions, do they?
Not really, no. No, they don't. It's a tricky one. The question as to who suffers. I mean, certainly I am still trying to figure out what happens to depositors' money. That's one question I'm still chasing as we speak, because I think it was an industry-related rule in the UK that even if the bank collapsed, because of their deposits with the Bank of England, you get a certain percentage of your money back. And I'm hopeful. I'm yet to get the full details of that in terms of Ghana. What I do know, however, is that I think the government has, or the Bank of Ghana has come out to say, you know, that, you know, people's bank accounts will still be running okay, even though I think now with the consolidated bank. So, look, the bottom line for me is this: money has been lost. A lot of money has been lost. And it's taxpayers' money. It's depositors' money. Now it's almost as though because we have, or the Bank of Ghana has given out liquidity support, which is taxpayers' money, it's almost as though now the way to see it is this, that the original depositors lost money and all of us also lost money, even if you weren't a depositor in those banks.
Exactly.
Right. So that's another angle to it. So, I mean, for me, it's not so much about who pays. For me, what it comes down to is that, and here's the difference I want to make with the UK one, is that, yes, banks were collapsing, but as soon as they got to know about it, they moved in without any delays. Unlike in our case that we're talking about, was the fact that, you know, the report was out a while ago, at least before the last election. People knew about the wrongs that were happening, and people did not move when they were supposed to move. So that's the big difference, is that when these things happen, you want to cut your losses. That's the trick to it. If you don't cut your losses, the losses just goes bigger than it should be. So we know monies were taken. The monies can be tracked, in my view, being a forensic auditor. I think the monies can be tracked. I hear the Bank of Ghana is trying to prosecute those, investigate first and then prosecute those it feels have been involved in all of this. But then, of course, there's the cry about it now that because it's a white-collar crime, it has to be treated very carefully. Otherwise, it's easy to lose evidence into thin air. And I agree with that. So, you know, hopefully some relief comes by way of the perpetrators being found out and being dealt with. The only concern I have, as is always the case with the Ghanaian sort of approaching this, is that it drags on for so long, and before you realize, you know, there is nothing left to recover, really. And as we say, as we forensic auditors say, you know, the trace is sharpest when it just happened. As long as you keep some breathing space between when things get rounded up, you lose the trace. You know, you lose the trace. As we're talking right now, if people have money stashed somewhere, those monies are probably out of the system by now. And so it's a mixture of, you know, trying to get a balance between speed and tact. And I can only hope that, you know, we get this thing done, because if it doesn't happen, then, you know, there's going to be a lot of distrust in the banking sector. And, you know, you can't run an economy without the banking sector.
That's really true. That's really true. Is there anybody that can, in terms of challenging decisions, how is there any sort of thing like that, for example, in the corporate sector, where challenging decisions in terms of making wrong decisions that people think is going to affect the corporations?
Right. See, that's a very interesting question. So, I mean, it's not only one person that makes up management. There's quite a number of people who would make up management. So if you take management decisions, for example, within that management, if there is anybody within that management team that disagrees with a decision being taken by the rest of management, that person, and especially if we're talking about this in the banking sector, for example, that person has an ethical responsibility, I want to put it like that, to report the matter to their board or to a regulator, for example. Now, in the UK, it's quite easy because you have, you know, the Prudential Regulation Authority. You have the central bank. I'm not suggesting the central bank, but you have a lot of regulators. You have the Prudential Regulation Authority. You have the central bank itself.
I think you have the Financial Conduct Authority as well.
Yeah, you have the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, and then you even have the Financial Policy Committee, which sort of just advise on a macro level, you know, the things that may affect the banking sector. But you have all this, and then you have, of course, the Ombudsman and all those. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunities for you to actually report issues that are happening that you are unhappy about. That is at the management level. Then, of course, if it is happening, if the decision being taken is unpalatable at the director level, obviously from the director's position, you cannot go anywhere else above the board. And so for that kind of level, it makes sense to go directly to the regulators, which in the UK, again, like I said, you have about 4, 5, 6 of them. There's even a consumer regulatory authority that you can apply to if you don't want to go directly to the prudential or the financial conduct authority. So you have all these elements in there. In the case of Ghana, I believe what it is appearing like is that it means you have to go directly to the Bank of Ghana. Now, I cannot say for a fact whether the Bank of Ghana has its own public reportage kind of network or pipeline that you can go through, as there is in the UK and of course in the US. So if there is, then that's great. If there isn't, then maybe it's something we need to start thinking about, whistleblowing and the likes. I don't think generally, and this is not a Bank of Ghana issue or a particular industry issue, but generally there aren't a lot of opportunities for whistleblowing in Ghana, I must say. The culture is not even there for whistleblowing, because you are seen as a backbiter or you are seen as a backstabber. So, you don't, people, it's difficult to take it upon yourself, the responsibility to speak truth in a way that you feel protected. As mostly happens, you who speak out the issue around the whistleblowing may end up being the one in the middle of the risk associated with whistleblowing. So I think those are systemic issues we need to look at in a different way and begin to encourage, because there needs to be whistleblowing across every level, whether it's at the governance level or at the management level or at the individual workers level. There needs to be opportunities, because sometimes it may not even be things spotted at the board level or at the management level. They may be spotted at the operational level. And people need to know that they can report those issues in the interest of the larger community and not get punished for reporting them.
Exactly. And I think one of the things I like that you said in terms of whistleblowing and the risk associated with it, because if you are not going to be protected, then nobody is going to whistleblow anything, and everybody will sit in their comfort zone for things to happen the way it has to. Now, does it mean that the only regulator we have in Ghana, for example, when it comes to banking sector, for example, because in the UK they've got so many regulatory bodies. When even it comes to the NHS, there are so many regulatory bodies, banking sector, the teaching, there are all of them have got their regulatory bodies. And some of these regulatory bodies are independent. Now, in Ghana, for example, do you have this kind of regulatory bodies? And if we have, what are they doing? If we don't have them, does it mean that, for example, Bank of Ghana is the only regulatory body for the whole banking system in Ghana? I think that is too much of a work to do, isn't it?
There is the. I think apart from the. I mean, with the banking sector, for example, yes, Bank of Ghana is the primary regulatory authority, and I mean, I'm not holding brief for them, but let's be honest. I think I'll take this one on the chin, but I think the banking sector in Ghana, one, is not very large, and two, is not as complex as what you see in the UK. Okay, so obviously, depending on the complexity, the number of regulators might increase. But I do agree with you that if you want to compare Ghana to the the UK, for example, if you notice, for example, in the UK, the Prudential Regulation Authority is sits on its own, even though it has a link with the central bank, but it entirely sits on its own. In our case, for example, the supervisory unit of the Bank of Ghana still sits within the Bank of Ghana itself. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I'm just saying, the structures are a bit different. My view, and this is what I think, it's not a fact per se, but I simply think the reason why it is so in Ghana right now is very likely because I don't have all the facts in front of me in the banking sector, but I suspect it is because, one, the banking sector is not as huge as what we have in the UK, and it's definitely not as complex as we have in the UK. I mean, you can literally count the number of products that the banks in Ghana deal in, and it's nothing complex.
Wow, that sounds great to me, and I think I believe that when we have got independent bodies, it is going to help streamline things better. For example, when you look at the health sector, right? They've got all these regulatory bodies that comes in from time to time to check from the director of the hospital right down to the cleaner how they undertake their procedures. And some of these bodies are really independent. Now, my question I always ask is that now there's this talking about who watches the watchman. Who watches the Kolebu Hospital and the Confanoches? Who comes in to ask? Because I've worked in the health sector before, and one of the things that when these regulatory bodies are coming, everybody's panicking, from the director of the hospital to the cleaner. Because even the cleaner, they will come and stand by you and ask you the processes, how even you mix your water. And this kind of is like a 1 week thing, and it's like hell. And that 1 week, you see, the hospital is spotless because everybody and this one, they even do how the league table and all that. Nobody wants their hospital to be at the end of the league table. It's like being in the Premier League, So I think these things are going to help our organizations to really stand on its feet and to be alert. Sometimes they come in unannounced, and when they come in unannounced, sometimes the report is very bad. And because they can come in unannounced, it always keeps the management, the board, everybody alert at all times. And I think though our economy is not that big, how difficult it is to institute some of this.
Look, Oscar, I totally agree with you that some of these bodies need to be independent. I mean, independent can be talked about from different angles. Do we want it to be independent from the banks themselves, because Bank of Ghana is, or do we want it to be independent of Bank of Ghana as well, so that there is no collusion, as we have seen within the Bank of Ghana, to award some of these licenses, for example, that we have become aware of? So I agree with you. There needs to be some level of standalone, independent unit handling some of these things without fear or favor. But, I mean, we can have an independent body. It still comes down to the human element, Oscar. And I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, way before I left for the UK, I did some work in partnership with the banking supervision department. So, I mean, for me, it was painful to know that they had been, they had known about some of the things that had happened and didn't move, or some people intentionally decided to close an eye on the issues that were raised within Bank of Ghana themselves. So, yes, we should have independent bodies. Yes, we should have And with those independent bodies, or within even those independent bodies, we should have opportunities for whistleblowing and all that. But it also means, you know, we need to staff those organizations that we really want to call independent with very strong men and women, for that matter, people who cannot take a yes or no lying down, but standing up. But you see, for me, the crucial thing about having independent regulators, for example, is this: they have to be consumer-centered. Once the consumer is not their big reason or their big objective, then it defies the process, because in most of these cases, the consumer is the one at the losing end. And therefore, it is crucial that, you know, whatever independent body we have set up has that notion that it is in there to protect the consumers. If you take the Financial Conduct Authority, for example, it is there to, one of its first ordinances, or its first objective, is to protect the consumer. And then the number 2 on that list is to protect the integrity of the banking sector itself. And then, of course, the third one, which is an interesting one you might know, for the, if I remember correctly, for the Financial Conduct Authority, is to inspire competition that is beneficial to the consumer. So if you notice, out of those 3 objectives, 2 of them are directly related to the consumer as the person they want to protect, more than the sector.
Wow. So at the end of the day, everything must be geared towards the consumer. But we are living now, having scenarios where everything is gearing towards the board and the people at the top. And I think this must change. I think this should be the last time we'll experience this, because I think the consumer has been suffering for some time now. I remember back in the days there was this pyramid scheme, and my dad invested in it, and
sorry for your loss.
It nearly, you know, since then he's never paid into anything with high interest rate, you know. So I think some of these things to be done, but I want us to go back to one critical aspect of this whole discussion, and that is effective communication. I believe that if communication is done very well, some of these things might not be happening. Where do you think effective communication comes in to really bridge this gap?
I mean, in terms of communication, I mean, there are 2 levels for me in all of this. You know, if you take the organization itself, communication should be effective from management to board. That's one. And then communication should be effective from the operational team to either management or board. There should be those opportunities to communicate. What I think, and after all this has happened, you know, I have had the opportunity to talk to some, you know, ordinary workers who saw some of these things almost happening, and they were scared. But, you know, if you are in that circumstance, the first thing you think about is your salary. Knowing very well that if you say or you shout Jack right now, your salary is not protected. You know, so I don't think there was I think there was a bit of a problem with the management communicating what exactly was going on with the board. It does not mean the board was precluded from these things, because it's their responsibility to ensure that some good level of communication was happening between them and management. But for me, the crucial thing was that it did not appear as though there were very strong communication lines between the operational level of workers and the very top hierarchy, or for that matter, any other opportunity for them to communicate outside the organizations, even if they saw something wrong happening. So that's a big communication issue there for me. But obviously, as we have seen now, there was also a communication issue between the reports that came in, some of the banking supervision's own reports, and at the time, the head of or the management of Bank of Ghana, and why they didn't act on that. You know, and so there's all this issues. Some of them worked well, but no actions were taken. Some of them didn't work at all. Some of them didn't even exist. So I think when you say communication, yes, you're right. We just have to, and I've been told, and I think there's been an announcement that the Bank of Ghana has instituted its own internal sort of watching the watcher unit to be able to deal with some of these issues of supervision that come up, so that, you know, it can be caught in the bud before it starts to spill outside. But certainly there is a lot of work to do. I remember very well when the crisis happened in the U.S., for example, when it started from the U.S., for example. As soon as that happened, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was passed by the U.S. Congress in 2002. That sort of, I think, the most intense ones for me were the SOX Acts 302 and 404 that required, for example, the directors to certify whether the financial statements were actually true or not, and to also ensure that they had put in place controls, and every year to report on whether those controls were functional or not. So with everything that has happened now in our environment in Ghana, as I put it, I think it should not end as just prosecuting people to get some money back, but immediately there should be a way to look at it all and say, where did the industry go wrong, and what extra regulations need to be put on board, what new laws need to be enacted to make sure this thing doesn't happen again. And for me, that is what it always is that things need to only happen once for us to move and correct them from ever happening, or at least reduce the risk of them ever happening again. And I'm hoping that all these things come into play.
Interesting, yes. But I want to have a follow-up question. And,
sure.
And that is the operational team. They are normally at the lower side of the ladder in terms of the corporate ladder, you know. The question is, those people at the top, do they listen to them? I think this is a general question. It's not even with Ghana, because even in this Europe and Americas, if you are the lower side of the ladder, hardly people listen to you with your views.
I mean, you may not be listened to, but I mean, I think it's fair to also say that there are procedures that one can follow if you feel there is something that is of very peculiar importance that either may affect the organization or you as a person or somebody else as a person. I think there are procedures that can be followed. Whether those procedures are functional or operational enough is another thing.
I think I'm getting a call, yeah? This is the second time. Let me try and pick it.
Okay.
Hello?
Hey, hello?
Yes, do you want to contribute to the show?
Yes, boss.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just came in. So.
Okay.
I just saw it on Facebook and said, let me go and see what's the topic.
Oh, it's on corporate governance, right? So you can just follow, all right? Thank you very much. Yes, I think we had a call. Marek, you can call back, please. We're going for a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion.
The IWFT team presents Footprints on Star Radio UK with your host, Oscar Bimpong, every Thursday at 7 p.m. Star Radio UK, your finest Afro-Caribbean station in London.
Bed of roses, bed of roses, bed of roses. My name is Doreen Carter. I invite you to join me on Star Radio UK this and every Saturday at 9:30 p.m. in discussing what goes on behind the curtains with my panel of experts. Remember, the time is 9:30 p.m. this and every Saturday. Bed of Roses is brought to you by the kind courtesy of Voices of Esther.
Welcome back to the Footprints Radio Talk Show, and this is your regular host, Oscar Bimpong, always in the driving seat, taking you to your destination of success. I think we just lost Marek, but he's back. And Marek, the person that called just wanted to know the topic we were discussing, no contribution. Yes. Exactly. We were talking about communication, and you were talking about the operational team and whether they are being listened to or not.
Yes. But yeah, no, I was saying that even though you may not directly be listened to by your, so I think there's two levels of communication there. Either that you feel you have an input into the operations that you're a part of and it's not being listened to, but there's only so much you can do in that regard if you're an employee. But then there's also the communication that relates to things that may be going on within the organization that you feel are detrimental either to the state, either to the organization itself, or either to any human person. Those are different, and I think there are procedures, certainly in most organizations, as to how you can deal with those.
Yes, I think yes. That's a great point. But you see, that one of the reasons why I ask you that I think there is sometimes there is a disconnect between those at the top and those at the bottom. I remember I was working in a place back in the days, and sales were really going down. So there was a new branch manager, and this branch manager, when he came in, he never sat in the office. He was either with the staff on the ground or with the customers. And one day I asked him, why is it that as a whole branch manager, you are always working with us? And this is one thing that he said. He said, if you want to find answers, you have to be with those at the lower level of the ladder and the people that you are serving.
Very true.
Do you think where we are coming from, our culture really even allows people to come to that level? Because I've been to the banking hall, for example, in Ghana, where the place is too packed, but the branch manager is just relaxed, sitting in his seat, doing nothing. And some people who are even seen at the top are just sitting down. Do you think this is actually right? And how can we correct this? Because this is not about humility. This is about service.
I'm going to say something that I think I'm going to get bashed, but I have to say it.
Don't worry. Don't worry. If it has to be said, it has to be said.
It has to be said.
Yeah, I will take some of the bullets for you.
Here's the truth, Oscar. I think it is fair to say that most organizations in Ghana don't do customer relations, or that they do customer relations in a very poor manner. I certainly have had the experiences you have had, and most of the time it almost feels as though you are being done a favor by being served. There is also this element of the big manism in our corporate culture, such that if you are the big man, you cannot be seen down with the ordinary guy.
Exactly.
Or the ordinary worker. It's I mean, if you ask me, I don't want to touch anybody's ego, but I think it's let's just say it's sad. I think it's more or less sort of like an opportunity for some people. I'm not saying everybody who does that, but I've come to feel it's an opportunity for some people to feel a space in themselves, because I've come across some really big managers, directors here in Ghana who don't mind mingling with, you know, those at the very bottom, but those are themselves even some of the very highest achievers in the corporate sector. So it's I'm not sure whether it's a cultural thing or it's an attitude thing, but the reason why I won't say it's an attitude thing is because it's so widespread. I am tempted to believe it's a cultural thing about big manism, if there's ever any such word as that. But I genuinely don't know where it's coming from. It's sad if we are looking at customer service. You're right, elsewhere in other jurisdictions, I've been served by bank managers before. I've been served by managers in coffee shops. I've been served by managers in restaurants. As long as but that is what I said earlier. For some of these people, the mindset is that as long as the customer is happy, then they are doing their job. Whereas in a lot of the big manism environments I see around, as long as I act the boss, then I am all right. Forget about whether the customer is being served or not. And sadly, as is the case, it is the case, unfortunately. But it's certainly not an attitude thing. I think a part of it is it's too widespread to think it's just an attitude thing.
No, it goes beyond an attitude. I think it's more of a cultural thing, as you are saying. But basically, we will give them the benefit of the doubt because we haven't found out the statistics real. But you see, these are some of the things that makes people to find answers when even they are going wrong. You see, the people on the ground have got answers more than the people at the top.
Very true.
Exactly, because they have the day-to-day relationship with the clients. And whatever decisions that you make, they are the people that run with the decision. So they see the challenges and the difficulties in terms of implementing it. So if you got let me tell you the example that was given. Within 6 months, that branch manager turned everything around. And you know one thing she did? She brought somebody at the entrance of the shop. And that person was just doing 8 hours during the peak times, and all that person was doing was to greet customers, have conversation with them, and take out ideas in terms of some of the challenges customers were facing.
So the customers were feeling heard.
Exactly. But you see, even that person is not going about asking directly some of the challenges you are facing, but out of conversation, he is always picking out things, and all those things were implemented over time. And within 6 months, everything was turned around. And these are some of the things that you are talking about, this big mannerism that we don't even know whether it exists. You know, until you have the humility to be down there, you will not find answers. And I think these are some of the things our leaders should learn. I think during election, they can eat kenke with us. But when they win, when they win the elections, then we cannot go to Moving Peak Hotel with them.
I think it's easy to figure out, you know, whether those kenkes are being eaten, you know, because they want to, is a normal thing for them, or because you know, they want to do it to show that they are human, or they can relate to the ordinary person. I think those things are quite easy to spot. I mean, you can spot somebody from a mile away if they're acting, or if they are. And unfortunately, you know, these things, the political gimmicks, they still sell in our side of the coin. So it is what it is.
Time is really fast approaching 8 o'clock, and I think our time is almost up. And I think we've really done justice to this topic in terms of really discussing in depth to the best of our ability. But before I go, man, I want to know your ambition, man, because you are too ambitious. I don't know what tablet that you have taken. I think you have to give me such of one of those tablets, because it looks like you are making it seem that I'm not too ambitious. What is going on with your life now? Tell me, talk to me. Because a lot of people want to hear it as well.
What, political ambitions?
Yes, in general, and political, I would say is the subset of all the ambitions.
Well, I think we all are ambitious, except that our ambitions are different. So I don't think there's somebody out there who is not ambitious. I think our ambitions are a bit different, but we all have ambitions. If you ask me about my political ambitions, all I can say now is that keep an ear on the ground. You will hear it soon. But I do have political ambitions. I wouldn't say now at what level, but I can assure you, I am here to give it my 120%.
I think we will top it up to make it 150 for you.
I'll be more than honored.
You see, because you see, one thing now I'm loving about the Nigerians is how young people are really going for the presidency.
That's right.
And I think Ghana should follow suit by getting young people to start fighting. I was speaking to one Nigerian guy, and one of their guys came here. I think I even saw you having a picture with him. I think Sowori or so. Yes. Yes. And I was telling him that, look, this guy needs to do. Man. Yes, this guy needs to do Obama style of campaign. Just give one city. That is how people will support. If you've got 30 million or 20, if you've got 10 million young people that are giving one city, that is 10 million Ghana cities.
Are you offering me money to support my campaign?
Why not? If I have to, I will. but we're talking in terms of strategy. Nigerians are over getting to 200 million. If you've got 100 million young people who will support a young person in terms of presidency, and if each one of those giving 1 naira, how much is that? That is 100 million naira. We are in business, you know, and that is strategic positioning. So I think I'm just praying that you are not going to go anything less than the presidency. That's going to be my fasting for the next few days.
I thank you for your vote of confidence, and I promise you that you will hear good news about my my final decisions. But I think I'm excited. I think there are people who are already beginning to be excited. I think it's a bright new day. It needs to be a bright new day, and I have no doubt that, you know, things are going to start changing around here. And I think we need that. I think it's about time these things start to happen. And I look forward to those days coming. I really am looking forward.
So do you know what, right? I think, you know, for me, for example, we voted for these old guys for a long time, right? I think that there is a saying that if that medicine is going to cure you, you just need 1 teaspoonful to really have the feeling that it's going to cure you. And how many times have we had this medicine and it's not working? I believe that for me, anybody that comes into the market, I will give that person a chance. Why? Because we need a level of change. And you see, the way the world is moving around now, the way technology is moving, the way system and processes are moving, we don't need somebody that finished, for example, law school in the 50s to lead us. We need young, fresh minds that will lead us. Let us try young people and see whether they are going to work for us. People say, oh, they are even more corrupt than the old guys. Have we tried them? No. Let's give them a chance and see the way things will go. So we are rooting for you, and I will be waiting patiently for that, and we will going to take it from there. Secondly, I want you to talk to me about your books. I think you wrote one recently as well that has been all over social media. If you can tell people about your books, where they can find it. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's so the book is titled Seven Dwarfs and a Bridge. It's one of my smallest books I've ever written, but it stands out, a very powerful book. The idea of that book is to sort of, along the same lines as you were talking about earlier, is to jolt us from our slumber, really. Is to jolt us from a slumber. My father always said to me, if a man is dying, you don't whisper in his ears to wake up. You actually shake him up. And so that book is supposed to sort of pierce through our minds and get us thinking in a totally different way about Ghana and how we need to move her forward. My view is quite simple. Look, this country has given us as its citizens so much. What have we given Ghana back, if you ask me? And so that is the idea for the book. It's on my Facebook page somewhere, and I'm sure I'll repost it again one of these days. But for those living outside the country, Ghana, you have an opportunity to own a hard copy yourself. So if you go on Amazon and just Google Seven Dwarfs and a Bridge, or Google my name, or search for my name on Amazon, it should come up. And I'm not charging for the publishing of the book. You're literally just paying for the printing and the postage. I wrote it for free, and I want people to have it for free. But if you want a hard copy outside of Ghana, then it's on Amazon. You can just pay for the postage for it and get it into your mailbox. It's a good book to read. It's a very quick book. But for those who still want it in e-book copy or in PDF, just drop your numbers for me on my wall or something, and we should be able to get copies to you quite quickly.
Yes.
It has the WhatsApp numbers, though.
Yeah, exactly. And those of you who are watching us on Facebook Live, I think you can drop the link as well, your telephone numbers over there, so that he can send it to you. And Marek, we want to thank you for coming on the show. You've always been a blessing coming on this show. And I've always told you that you have earned a mark on this show for the rest of your life, So actually, we'll be scheduling another time for you to come on the show, because you have got so much in you that you need to share with people before you blast off one day. Thank you very much for coming on the show, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Oscar. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful show. This is the Footprints Radio Talk Show with your regular host, Oscar Bimpong, always in the driving seat, taking you to your destination of success. It's been an amazing journey with Mary Kofi Gan, who has really helped us to have in-depth understanding of corporate governance. And next week, Thursday, we are still going to be here 7 p.m. GMT +1. So don't change the dial. Property Hour is coming at 9 o'clock. If you want to invest in properties, one of the ways to make a living in life and to be wealthy, don't miss this show. Don't change the dial. The Footprints is off, but Starr Radio UK is on with Property Hour. Bye-bye. Have a lovely weekend.